You know what's unusual about people born in the 1990s? They remember a world that no longer exists. They spent afternoons outside until the streetlights turned on, yet also remember creating their very first AIM username. They used encyclopedias for homework assignments, but also downloaded songs through Napster. They're the last generation to experience a childhood without smartphones, yet they came of age alongside social media. And that divide created what researchers now call the 90s kids syndrome. If you were born between 1990 and 1999, you hold a place in history that will never happen again. You're not exactly a millennial. And you're certainly not Gen Z. You're the link between two completely different worlds, Cartoon Network and YouTube, Blockbuster and Netflix, playing outside and gaming online. And here's what no one really tells you. That divided childhood created adults who are both nostalgic for simplicity and completely comfortable with complexity. And it's influencing your mental health in ways you likely don't even realize. Picture this. It's 1998. You're 8 years old. Saturday mornings mean waking up early to watch cartoons. Scooby-Doo, Rugrats, DuckTales. You pour yourself a bowl of sugary cereal and sit cross-legged in front of the TV. No tablets, no streaming platforms, no on-demand anything. If you missed it, it was gone. And somehow, that made it feel more meaningful. After cartoons, you went outside, not because your parents forced you to, but because that's simply what kids did. You played hide and seek until sunset. You climbed trees. You rode bikes around the neighborhood without helmets or supervision. Scraped knees and muddy clothes weren't disasters. They were badges of honor, proof that you had truly lived that day. According to research on childhood in the 90s, kids spent an average of 3 to 4 hours outside every day. Today, it's less than 30 minutes. A 2023 WHO study found that more than 80% of today's adolescents fail to meet recommended physical activity levels. But you were part of the last generation that experienced unstructured outdoor play as the norm, not the exception. You didn't need expensive toys. A stick became a sword. An empty field turned into a battlefield. Your backyard transformed into whatever your imagination needed it to be. And because you couldn't Google what to do when you were bored, you developed something rare, creativity born from emptiness, the ability to create fun out of nothing. But here's where things become more complicated. You didn't just grow up in an analog world. You lived through the transition. You remember VHS tapes and rewinding them before returning them to Blockbuster. But you also remember when DVDs seemed almost magical. You used dial-up internet where a single web page could take 5 minutes to load. Yet by high school, you already had broadband. You typed school assignments on actual typewriters in elementary school. By middle school, you were already using Word documents. According to researchers, people born in the 90s experienced a unique mix of traditional education and the early rise of technology-based learning. You spent hours in libraries using card catalogs and encyclopedias. But you were also the first generation to regularly use computers at school. You're bilingual in a way no generation before or after will ever be. Analog by nature, digitally fluent, and shaped by social media. You remember life before all of it. You had real privacy. When you did something embarrassing, only the people who were there knew about it. No phones recording everything, no viral videos, no permanent digital trace of your worst moments. One person born in the 90s described it perfectly. We talked endlessly about each other and did unbelievably inappropriate things, but we never had to worry about it ending up online for everyone to see. You had the chance to figure out who you were in private. That's a luxury that may never exist again. But then MySpace arrived when you were a teenager. Facebook opened to everyone while you were in high school or college. Instagram appeared just as you were entering adulthood. You learned to curate yourself, to perform your life for an audience, to seek validation through likes and comments. And that shift, it divided your psychology in two. Here's what researchers began to notice. People born in the 90s experience an unusually intense sense of nostalgia. Researchers even call it 90s kid syndrome. And it's not just simple sentimentality, it's neurological. According to studies on psychological essentialism, people naturally believe their own experiences were more authentic than those of others. And 90s babies lived through a major cultural shift. They witnessed the end of one world and the beginning of another. So when they look back, they're not just remembering their childhood, they're grieving an entire way of life that vanished. The concept of rosy retrospection explains why you tend to idealize the past. Your brain filters out the ordinary and painful moments while preserving the emotional highs. It's not that the 90s were perfect. You only remember them that way because what you truly miss is not the era itself. It's the feeling behind it. Being completely present without endless comparison, living without putting on a show, existing without constantly recording everything. One researcher captured 90s kids perfectly. They stand as living proof of the fading of the old world and the emergence of the modern age. Yours is the only generation able to truly compare both worlds. You know what was gained, but you also understand what was lost. And here comes the part that is more difficult to admit. A study from the University of California examining more than 27,500 adults revealed something deeply troubling. People born in the 90s experienced poorer mental health than any generation before them. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health disorders are far more common among people born in the 90s than among those born in the 80s, and these conditions tend to become more severe over time. The researchers concluded that technology and social media are among the leading causes. But it goes beyond that. You were raised with one set of values. As one researcher explained it, emotions and genuine feelings guided our lives. Then you were forced to adapt to a world where devices control nearly everything. You learned that friendships were built through shared experiences, only to watch social media transform connection into performance. You developed self-worth through real accomplishments, then stepped into a world where value is measured by followers and likes. That inner conflict creates a deep psychological burden. You're not struggling because you're weak. You're exhausted because you're trying to live between two completely incompatible realities at once. But there is something 90s babies have that no other generation possesses: perspective. You remember what life felt like before constant connectivity, so you still know how to put your phone away during dinner or take vacations without technology. You can sleep without constantly checking your devices because you still remember what real presence feels like. You value authenticity more than performance because your identity was formed before audiences were everywhere. And you understand patience because you once had to wait for things, for songs to download, for photos to be developed, for your favorite show to air at its scheduled time. You learned that delayed gratification was not only acceptable, it was simply a normal part of life. You experienced what researchers describe as a balanced childhood, one that existed between the analog and digital worlds. You climbed trees and built websites. You played tag and spent hours on video games. You read books while also discovering the early internet. That balance is rare and it's incredibly valuable. Today, people born in the 90s are in their mid-20s to mid-30s. You are contributing to society in meaningful ways. You carry both traditional values and technological fluency. At work, you help translate between generations. You bridge the gap between your boomer parents and your Gen Alpha children. You are the mediators, the interpreters, the ones who remember both the world before and the world after. Here's what no one tells you about being a 90s baby. You will spend much of your life caught between nostalgia and adaptation. You'll watch younger generations grow up entirely in a digital world and feel both envy and relief that they will never truly know what they are missing. You'll hear older generations romanticize the good old days and quietly think, I actually remember those days. They were never that simple. And you are not better than other generations, only different, shaped by timing. By being born at the precise moment when the old world was fading and the new one was emerging, you carry pieces of both, yet fully belong to neither. And maybe that is not a weakness. Maybe it is a form of wisdom. You can see what younger generations have lost. You understand what older generations struggle to grasp. You can hold both truths at the same time without feeling the need to choose sides. The world changed while you were growing up, and instead of destroying you, it made you adaptable, resilient, and self-aware. You are not confused about who you are. You are simply the only generation that remembers both worlds clearly enough to compare them honestly. If this felt personal, if you've been carrying this sense of nostalgia without fully understanding why, you're not alone. This channel explores the psychology of people caught between two worlds. Subscribe if you want to better understand the patterns shaping who you are. And if you're a 90s baby, leave your birth year in the comments. Let's see how many of us are out there quietly bridging two worlds that almost no one else remembers existing at the same time. Because you're not nostalgic for the 90s themselves. You're nostalgic for the feeling of being fully present. And maybe, just maybe, that feeling can still be found again. If today's video gave you value, hit like and share it with someone. Thank you for staying with me until the end.